Good morning. Welcome to Face the Nation. We begin today with the acting director of U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, Ken Cuccinelli. His agency is part of Homeland Security, and it manages the processing of applications for refugees, those claiming asylum or seeking citizenship. Thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
President Trump said he was going to delay the roundup of migrants for 2 weeks until Congress overhauled asylum laws.
Right.
It's been 2 weeks. This has not happened. So what is the administration going to do?
Well, essentially at this point, it's been put in Matt Albans's hand, the acting director at ICE. He's a career ICE officer, came up through the ranks, and they're ready to just perform their mission, which is to go and find and detain and then deport the approximately 1 million people who have final removal orders. They've been all the way through the due process and have final removal orders. Who among those will be targeted for this particular effort or not is really just information kept within ICE at this point.
So there had been reports that this would be just in the thousands. You're saying the roundups will be far larger scale.
No, I'm just pointing out that the pool of those with final removal orders is enormous. And, it's important to note, here we are talking about ICE doing its job as if it's special. And really, this should be going on a rolling basis for ICE, and they've been interfered with effectively and held up by the politics of Washington to a certain extent, and they're looking forward to just getting back to doing their job.
So Congress hasn't changed asylum laws.
They have not touched it.
Do you expect anything?
You know, I just saw the House calendar put out, I think, by the Speaker's office, and was disappointed to see nothing on that calendar to address this subject before they all go on vacation in August. So, and there are some relatively.
Without Congress?
Well, there are things we're doing. There are regulatory changes, but they take a long time, and they're not the equivalent of a legal change by Congress. We really need Congress, for instance, to fix the trafficking loophole that allows children from the Northern Triangle, for instance, and other countries around the world to not be repatriated quickly and returned to their families. We need help with the Flores fix, the Flores settlement that even the Obama administration fought the judge in that case in 2015.
This puts a 20-day limit on being able to detain.
Well, right, but it was, for almost 20 years, it was understood that that was to deal with unaccompanied children. The judge in 2015, opposed by the Obama administration, expanded that to families, and that has tied our facilities up in knots. It's made it very difficult to manage that population, to keep the families together in detention while they go through the due process.
I understand you're new to the job, but you were just pointing out the Democratic-controlled House hasn't acted on asylum laws. Why didn't the Trump administration do anything on this when Republicans were in control of 2 houses? Why didn't President Trump and Leader McConnell do it?
Yeah, I think the effort was being made, and Congress wasn't responsive.
Leader McConnell wasn't able to get this done?
And right now you see the only effort arising out of Senator Graham working with Senator Durbin is the discussion I observe. I see it from the same perspective you do, meaning outside, to try to work on asylum loophole fixes. That's the only place we see any effort going on right now.
Tell me about some of the regulatory changes you think you can make without congressional approval.
Right. Well, there's some coming over the next few months, like public charge rule. We're looking at what we can do in the Flores environment short of legislation to ease the pressure on our agencies. And I mean, the 3 immigration agencies are my agency, USCIS, which handles asylum and refugees, as you noted, and of course ICE, detention and removal and interior enforcement, and then the Border Patrol, CBP, doing what their name describes as border protection. So all working together. And we also have some adjustments in the asylum space coming, we hope they're working on. But part of what we have to analyze is, does Congress have to do this? And how much can we do? So those are things that I'm just diving in here in my first month as to determine how far we can go without Congress, because until they're willing to act, we're not going to see a significant change.
And you have not been formally nominated and appointed by the president.
Correct.
And Congress has not confirmed you
Correct. My
to this
appointment
job.
was
So how much
principal
authority?
deputy, and I serve as acting director.
How much authority do you think you have to make these changes? I mean, it seems like, and critics will certainly say, you continue to try to bypass Congress to make changes in a way that is not how their oversight role is supposed to function.
Well, look, I mean, you're hearing from me, you'll hear from the acting secretary, you've heard from the president. We want to see Congress act. It's a congressional solution that's going to be required for long-term, lasting change that doesn't get tied up in courts in the way that every regulation does.
Well, on those regulatory changes, can you change the definition of who is allowed to immigrate and claim asylum? And how do you do that in a way that doesn't keep people who are legitimately fleeing violence and persecution from seeking safe haven?
Yeah, and it's important for people to realize that we continue to effectuate an asylum process that is intended to help people who are persecuted for political, religious, et cetera reasons. But that whole process is being swamped by fraudulent asylum claims from our border.
The administration tried and failed to change that, though, had tried to block those fleeing domestic violence, had tried to block those fleeing gang violence, and the courts said no. So,
well, the courts, the president has attempted to undertake several actions, including cutting off asylum between ports of entry. For instance, last November, that was enjoined by courts. That's being litigated. The level of judicial activism to stop this administration is historically unprecedented. We've never seen anything like it before.
Well, I want to get on to the border detention facilities. You don't have oversight of those in your current role. But this IG report that came out this week just confirmed what we have been hearing from Homeland Security since back in March about the horrific conditions in many of these facilities, overcrowding, thousands more detainees being held for longer, including children, than they should have been. So you now have billions of dollars from Congress. When does this change?
Well, it's already changed. Most of the money in the supplemental, which is what I assume you're referencing, went to address children in this process. And in fact, over the course of the last month, since that supplemental, we've gone from about 2,500 children in facilities not designed for them down to a fraction of that.
So those images that we saw this week, that a government investigator released, is that still happening at U.S. facilities?
That is not happening with respect to children in particular. We do have overcrowding in some places, but that's a matter of the rush at the border and what our system has been designed to absorb. And while the same people come down to the border from Congress and complain about it, they don't actually go back to Washington and do anything to fix it.
And lastly, on the census, there seems to be consensus that you do need to know the number of people in the country. But when it comes to the question of citizenship, which is where we've seen this back and forth with the Supreme Court saying the administration can't move forward with its legal justification at this time, the president says he still wants to. The concern here is that it could also cause, by including it, a skewing of the results, inaccurate figures.
Well, it's been collected. It's been collected many, many times in the past, and that concern
not including
has never
this
arisen.
Question since the 50s or 60s.
1950s, it's been included, and it's also been included in the more detailed example. I don't know what the Commerce Department calls it. Doesn't count every single.
But immigration
entity.
officials like yourself will not see ultimately the details of this census in
Answers
terms
of any
immigration
person
status?
are not tied. It's aggregated data. So that's correct.
So the concern that this is being used for political purposes is why I'm asking you that question.
Right. Well, the census is intended to gather an awful lot of information the way it's used now. However, if your question is, will my agency or other agencies see a person who says, no, I'm not a citizen, and their name and address and so forth, that's taken on an aggregated basis. That's not individualized data that comes to us.
So no.
Correct.
Thank you very much.
Good to
Mr.
be with you.
Cuccinelli.